All right, so I woke up and I realized that a month had flown by, and I said, what the heck? We haven't done a show in like a month or 6 weeks or something like that. I mean, when is the last show we did? It was in September, I believe. Does anyone here remember when it was?
It was like September
right around Labor Day.
9th. Yeah, like September 9th, I think.
Was it early in September?
Yeah.
I will go
Last
with
time
that.
I was on.
I think it was.
At least
yeah.
early. Huh?
Wow. Well, then we're overdue, I guess. Welcome to everybody. So many great comments already in the chats saying welcome back. Well, we appreciate that very, very much. In all honesty and sincerity, personally, these guys were chomping at the bit to keep going when I said, you know what, I just need a little bit of a break here. I've been doing shows for 6 years, and I just needed to step back a little bit and catch my breath. We were talking earlier before this program started. We had a couple of partners in my broadcast come and go, and I just felt like I just needed to catch my breath. So, Vince, I hope I look a little more rested than I did on September 9th or whatever date it was the last time we did a show.
First.
Was it the first?
September 1st.
Oh,
yeah.
Hey, it was before Labor Day.
Holy cow.
Yeah, you look rested, though. You look very rested.
Well, that's good because I've actually...
You look energetic. You look younger. I look younger.
It must be the 80s hairdo that I'm sporting now.
It is. There you go.
The feathered hair, which I have to tell you. So one of the things I started doing in the midst of this break from the program is I've started remodeling some apartments that I own. No, I never do that kind of work myself. I'm just not good at it, and I don't know how to do it, but I discovered the magic of YouTube instructional videos, and now I feel like I could build the Empire State Building by myself if I wanted to. I'm finding that in practice, it's not quite as easy as it looks on those videos sometimes. But either way, I've taken that job on myself. And at the end of the day, when I come home from working there, my body hurts, JR. It hurts in every place it could possibly hurt, head to toe. I think you probably know what I'm talking about.
I do. I've had a lot of busy weekends, and of course, I've been on vacation a lot. So, but I was looking at my calendar. I'm going away to a football game this weekend. So I said, this is my last weekend this fall. And it's cooling down here.
Oh, surprise. He's going on another vacation, just if in case anybody's keeping score.
I said, you know what? I'm going to do my part and cut up some firewood so that I can take a dent out of my heat bill this winter.
Yeah, that's
so
smart.
I cut down a tree that's like, and the last time I cut down a tree, cut it up, and split it by hand, I felt a lot better after I did it than I did Saturday. So I hear you.
Yeah.
The bodies only go one direction generally, and that's, it get worse.
Yeah.
But, I was glad I did it.
Vince, I know you don't do any manual labor, but if you did, your body would probably hurt from it, right? I mean, it's just we get there. That's what happens, right?
I've done a little bit. Like you, I've done the same thing. You watch these things on YouTube, you're like, that's easy. Next thing you know, I know Trish was mentioning before about pulling all of your work stuff out of your home office. I had an office in my house. I built a bar in it. That's how I fixed that problem. So now I have no work in the house at all. So.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
And Trish, you said you're doing some house cleaning. You're getting stuff out of there. You're making room for just some breathing room, I guess.
I am committing the great purge. So yes, I am going to have a big yard sale here in a couple weeks. This is like not to brag, but for a girl, this is a big deal. I got rid of half of the clothes in my closet. Half of my closet is completely empty.
Wow.
Yeah.
And for a woman, this is like a big deal. So I feel I got all the clothes in my dresser. They are no longer in bins under the bed. So this is like I'm purging, and this is good. I have to keep this up because the minute it stops, I start collecting again. So I need to purge, keep purging. All right. Well, tonight we're going to do something a little bit differently. Obviously, those who are familiar with the show, which most of the people that I see in the chat rooms are definitely familiar with the show. We tend to bring up articles, things in the news, and chat about them, get comments about them. But we're going to do something a little bit different tonight because it's been so long since we've been on that we're just going to, I just kind of want to have a free-form discussion. I've got a bunch of topics. I know you guys have some things on your mind. But let's kind of get caught up on what's going on. And the first thing I want to talk about, Trish, is Biden's approval rating, because if you're believing the polls, he's ticking up. Do you think
that this is real? Do you think that maybe he's been out of the spotlight enough that people forget what a dolt he is, and they start to give him the benefit of the doubt on some things? What do you think's happening there?
No. I think it's just delusion. Like, even MSNBC said these are the worst numbers they've ever seen for presidential approval, the worst numbers they've ever seen for approval when it comes to the economy, the worst numbers they've ever seen. Like, Joe Biden has unequivocally shown that he is worse by far than any other president we've ever had. And I'm even talking Jackson, I'm really bad, worse than Carter. Like, this is unequivocally the worst. And it just cracks me up because everybody's like, oh, Trump was the worst ever. No, he wasn't. Trump's numbers for this time in his presidency are far better than Joe Biden's are right now. So I don't know about anybody else, but I could really do with some mean tweets. Hello, Elon Musk. I could really use those mean tweets back, and that $1.95 gas. I really would like to see that again, because even with our tax holiday here in Florida, our gas is still like $3.29, $3.39 thereabouts, and that's with no state taxes on our gas right now. So the minute that tax holiday is over, we're going to be back to like pushing $4 a gallon again, and I'm not looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because in New York State we have a tax holiday as well. JR, they shaved off the 16 cents per gallon, whatever it is, state tax, and people forget that we'd be over $4 if it wasn't for that. But I want to go back to these numbers, JR. Look at if you look at the Fox News number, which is on the bottom of approval and disapproval, and you go up to, let's see, where is it here? This CNBC and CBS, they all have him at 46%, which, if that was the number, I mean, the average here is at 42.5, but if 46 was the number, that actually isn't that terrible.
Not horrific if you believe it. It is, give it a little more credence because you have several that are in the same range. But like you said, I was curious the mean. There's in the high 30s as well. So if you're in the low 40s, the thing is, he's been in the low 40s for a long time too. Usually, significant events happen and it oscillates. But I mean, he has been pretty pathetic here for a pretty long stretch of time. But and Vince can speak to this better than I. But when you get this close to a major election cycle, I'm a pretty big skeptic on anything I see that is painted with a political lens until proven otherwise. And I just, maybe his gaffes have been less frequent, but they're still more frequent than any president. And I said this one other time too. Usually presidents have to die before their approval ratings go up. In this case, Jimmy Carter is actually looking better and better and better than he ever was at any time since he's been president. So,
and even at 99 or whatever Carter is, 96, however the hell old he is, he's sharper than Joe Biden at this point, it seems. Vince, you've got a lot of familiarity with these kind of numbers. The disapproval numbers, I think, are probably the bigger story here, don't you think? I mean, those are pretty darn high.
Sure they are. Yeah, because your approval can be at 40% and your disapproval can still be under that, but you're in a situation where everybody knows who Joe Biden is. So it is kind of the disapprove number that is the focus, and those numbers are still high. And JR kind of said this, and he's right. We're getting closer to a major midterm election, and what happens anytime you get close to an election is both sides tend to go back to their base a little bit, and everybody starts to settle in, where they're comfortable, and that'll have a little bit to do with the uptick. I don't think Joe Biden's been in the public or been in the news nearly as much as he was over the summer when he was just tanking. I think they've done a good job of, whether it's a good job or not, they're hiding him a little bit. But I think the analogy here is that it's the sports team who has no wins on a season, and then they get their first win and everybody gets excited and they all go crazy and the fans are all happy. You're still in last place. You still only have one win on the season, but everybody feels better for a short time about it. I think that's what you have here.
Trish, you work in academia. One of the things that's making headlines, if you're looking in the right places, is the student loan forgiveness scheme that Biden concocted, which spends anywhere from $500 billion to $1 trillion, depending on which estimate you're looking at. And he did it without congressional approval. I want you to comment on it because it's been stopped by the courts, at least at this point, pending further review. But he made a very, very curious comment about this particular program in an interview he did over the course of the weekend.
Other piece what we're trying to do is, you probably are aware, I've signed a law that's being challenged by my Republican colleagues, the same people who got PPP loans for up to close to, in some cases, up to $500,000-$600,000. They have no problem with that. The individuals in Congress got those. But what we've provided for is, if you went to school, if you qualify for a Pell Grant, you qualify for you qualify for $20,000 in debt forgiveness. Secondly, if you don't have one of those loans, you just get $10,000 written off. It's passed. I got it passed by a vote or two, and it's in effect. And already a total of, I think it's now 13 million people have applied for that service.
Several problems with
Where
that.
do we start?
Yeah, let's start. Let's start with the obvious one here, where he said in that quote that he got it passed by a couple of votes. It's one thing to just say I got it passed when you're kind of just trying to gloss over the fact that it was an executive order. It's another thing to say by a couple of votes. That starts to indicate that he really has some false memories about what happened.
Well, Joe Biden is just one big false memory, if you ask me. Like, the guy could not tell the truth if his life depended on it. And this is a perfect example. Joe, there is no law. You didn't sign any law, and there was no law passed by Congress. You are full of crap. You signed an executive order, which is as useful as toilet paper. So that is what's being challenged, Joe. Not any law that was passed by Congress, because that didn't happen. And second of all, I love how he throws in the PPE loans, like the PPP loan. I was like, wait a minute. The members of Congress didn't get those loans. Their businesses that they ran got those loans, because Democrats shut everything down, and they needed to be able to pay their workers so that they were like, what dimension does this guy live in? Because I want to live there, because that is completely so out of touch with reality, and he's so far off in left field. But I mean, we should just all go around and tell like the best lie that Joe Biden has told lately. So like that would be one of them, that he had this law passed that forgave student loans, which he didn't.
Yeah, and JR, I really, really believe this wasn't just him lying. This was him completely not remembering how that particular policy was enacted. It wasn't a law. It was an executive order. And the other thing I'll point out, and Trish brought up the PPP comment, which was another thing I wanted to highlight here. They're comparing the PPP program to this student loan program, saying, well, if they're okay, the Republicans are okay with that, but they're not okay with this. The difference here, whether you agree with PPP or not, is that it was passed by Congress. That's the difference. That makes all the difference in the world, doesn't it, JR?
Well, absolutely. But in Joe's mind, it was passed by Congress by a couple of votes, right? I mean, he obviously remembers something was passed by a couple votes.
Exactly.
But he doesn't remember what. First, he stumbles about it being $2,000, and then there's a pause, and then he kind of catches himself, and you hear the wheels grind for a second, and then he goes $20,000 for one of those what do you call one of those things? Pell Grant, but one of those things, and then $10,000 for somebody else. I mean, I don't know who that group he was talking with, but you could see them start to shift in their seat and get nervous because they knew more about it than he did. I mean, so you're saying his approval rating is going up. He maybe is simply because he hasn't been out there doing the daily gaffes. It's now, every other day or two, but it's literally every time he opens his mouth, there's a gaffe. And to not be able to articulate a program that he counts as one of his achievements, that isn't even probably an achievement, because it was only possible because of the specter of COVID that we were still under. But about 3 weeks ago, he said we were no longer in COVID. So I find it difficult to believe that he can have it both ways, and I think the courts will prove that.
Yeah, and Vince, I want to bring up the fact that no one in that press corps, if you watch the extended clip, calls him on this. No one says a freaking word. Maybe JR is giving them the benefit of the doubt, and they don't know the difference between a law and an executive order.
That's there could be some truth to that. And I think there are times that the press is just as dumbfounded hearing and listening to this stuff that we are, and they don't know what to do. I really believe that. And again, when you look at this a lot, they're not, we know who the top echelon of the media are, right? We know who those people are when we see their names and stuff like that. And that's not sometimes who these are happening in front of. So this could be someone who's interviewing a president of the United States for the first time in their career. And they just said to themselves, what did they just, I mean, can you imagine like hearing that? What do? Do you embarrass the president of the United States? Do you go and try to get them to clarify? Because clearly he can't. And I'll be honest, I originally heard that the PPP argument, and that's obviously, that is a Democratic talking point to counter the student loan piece. And when I first heard it come out of Congress, I can't remember who it was that leveled the attack, but I heard it, I said, boy, that's not a bad argument. Now, it's not going to convince me or you or anybody who's listening to this program. Is it going to bring the base around and give them something to kind of get behind? Yep, it will. The people in the middle that it's going to convince, it'll convince a few of them. They're going to get some people. But now here you have the leader of their party, right? The president, your best talking head of the entire Democratic Party, when you hold that office, should be the president of the United States. And he bumbled the entire argument there for him. So, yeah, to your point, JV, I think the press, and I never give the press credit, right? But to give them a little bit of credit here, I think they have trouble, like we all do, actually accepting the fact, like, what the hell did he just say? But unlike us who come on the show and actually say, what the hell did he just say? They're reluctant to actually say that out loud, right? I think that's kind of what I think happens sometimes.
Yeah, and I heard, what's his name? Cardona, the secretary, education secretary. Is it Miguel Cardoza? I don't know. Cardona. Whatever it is. Yeah. He was using that argument as well. And again, there's a lot of differences. First of all, the PPP was a government program passed by Congress, signed into law by the president to help businesses that were forced to be shut down by the same government that passed it, so they could survive. That's very, very different, Trish. It's very, very different. The other thing I'll say about this, too, is that a lot of these programs, these COVID programs, were enacted, whether you agree that this was a pandemic or a plandemic or whatever the hell it was all part of an emergency response. This student loan payback thing, this is just a handout to placate a voting base.
Right. This is just buying votes is basically what it's doing. Biden is trying to buy. And this is my whole thing with that whole repaying the student loans. Number one, it's bullshit because it's a personal debt that you signed a contract. Like the taxpayer should not have. It's like, okay, so I want to go out and buy a brand new Mercedes. And now I think the taxpayer should pay for it because I don't want to pay for it anymore. But I still want the Mercedes. It's like you still have the education that you got. So why are you expecting the taxpayers to pay for it? And the limits on the income. And there's no verification of these incomes. It was $125,000. If you can't pay a student loan payment, now I had $75,000 in loans and my loan payment was $250 a month. If you're making $125,000 and you can't afford to pay $500 a month in student loans, then you have bigger problems than just not paying back your student loans. It means you are completely financially irresponsible. But that's the problem, is that we have an entire system that is set up that, hey, you can have $10,000 for an education, but we won't give you $10,000 to start a business. Like, I got a problem with that. If we can trust an 18-year-old to make decisions about their education, can't we trust an 18-year-old to make decisions about a business? I'd feel better about giving the kid a business loan than I would about giving him a loan to go to college, community college, because he doesn't want to go get a job because says mom's going to kick him out if he doesn't go to college or get a job. Because honestly, that's most of the people I deal with. It's like, I'm only here because my mom will kick me out if I don't go to college. Otherwise, I'll have to get a job. So it's the whole system, I think, is screwed, but at the end of the day, these are people who took out a loan. They signed the paperwork saying, I will pay this back, and they should have to pay it back because it's a big smack in the face to those of us who did pay our loans back, and it's a big smack in the face to all the hardworking Americans who don't have college debt, who went to trade school, who make way more money than I do with my 3 degrees. Like, what was I thinking? I'm the stupid one. But they're going to end up paying back those loans, and that's not fair to them either. So the whole thing is just it's just Joe Biden trying to get any votes he can because the Democrats know that they are screwed. There's 2 things they're really pushing right now. So student loan forgiveness and abortion. Those are the 2 issues they're going to keep pushing because that's what their base. That's where they get all those. They want to get the young people out and they want them to vote. And those are the 2 issues that they know will do it.
Trish, the chants of Trish for POTUS have started in the Getter chat, just so you know. your contingency and your constituents are all here. So congratulations on that. By the way, Good Dog and Foxy Lady, thanks for the contributions and the welcomes, welcome back messages in the Foxhole chat. Appreciate that. JR, as somebody who's on vacation most of the time, you run across a lot of servers. I mean, you've got, I don't know if they're servants or servers. When you go to restaurants, when you're on vacation, there are people, a lot of times college students, that'll serve you your high priced drinks and your exquisite meals. You get a lot of those kinds of servers. A lot of those people are working their way through college. I know I worked my way through college. I had a very small student loan, very, very small, but because I paid most of it myself and I worked full time all through college. What do you say to people like that? These servers that are waiting on you hand and foot, JR, while you're on vacation so they can pay their own tuition, and then somebody else is going to get let off the hook because they took loans and they probably aren't working at all. They're just partying at school.
Well, I tell you, we've already seen, and it's ubiquitous that nobody can find anybody to work as it is. And we went through COVID, which was basically shutting us down on purpose and then giving people money so they didn't have to work. And now we're somehow supposed to be surprised that we can't find workers, so, the government will take care of me and I don't have to work. Well, what's the mentality behind the student loan forgiveness program as well? They're entitled to that. I've said to others before, when this was going on here a year ago, I said, we're going to change the work ethic for a generation here. If we're not careful, we're not going to be able to find workers. And that's what is evident everywhere. And on the infrequent times when I've actually gone for a high-priced dinner and had my high-priced drink, I do appreciate those people that are waiting on me. And it hits me every time. I'm thankful that they're there, because I know how hard it is to actually find, people to do these jobs. Where before it was that's what everybody did. It was just what you did, right? You were going to take care of it yourself, and you had that work ethic, and that's what it's going to take to get you ahead and get through college and get the well-paying job. But the other thing I just want to say about this is, this was supposed to be paid for, was the rationale when he came out with this great idea, looking for a win. It was going to be paid for by all the savings they were going to have from the Inflation Reduction Act, which, as you know, wasn't an Inflation Reduction Act at all. And at best case scenario, in 2029 or 2030, that's when there might be a little bit of savings. But even if that was true, this was going to take care of any of that and then some. So this, I want to say, was bad policy, but it's not policy because Congress had nothing to do with it. But it's just another concoction, basically, to find something that was a win for them, I believe, in the face of all these things that are extremely bad, and attributing to his poor results and the poor poll numbers that he's had for months and months and months and months. Yeah,
Vince, to pick up on that point, moving on from the student loan issue, one of the things we often want from our government and our president specifically, we kind of define it as peace and prosperity. You look at either side of that equation, peace or prosperity, and we got none of it. Joe Biden actually the other day said that we're kind of preparing for Armageddon or something along those lines. He actually was talking about a possible nuclear Armageddon on his watch. We don't have peace, nor do we have prosperity.
Yeah, and I think we have had these discussions on the show that it's that there's both sides of the coin that we have a major problem with. It's at home and abroad, and the administration has been so weak. We know the trouble the economy's had. We know that, from what most people are saying, I think we're, I've heard somebody who's not an economist, but someone who's outspoken on these things saying, you need to buckle down during this fourth quarter because we don't know what the first 3 months of the next year are going to bring with everything. And most likely we have to assume that the situation with the economy is going to get worse. And I feel like we're in a situation right now where people have lost their patience, but seem to be holding on. Can you imagine if things get worse? And of course, politically, if things are going to get worse, they're going to get worse in January. They're not going to get worse in October, 2 weeks before a major midterm election, right? They're going to get worse then. And to that same effect, think about this. Things have, at least in the media and as far as this administration, they've quieted down in terms of a lot of the foreign policy. They're not talking about it. We haven't heard as much about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and the invasion of Ukraine. It seems like everything has died down a little bit just before this election, because what they're trying to do is they want to lull the voters to sleep, because if they can sneak this one past them, they know they can deal with it after the election. And when they've pushed it off till after the election, I believe, are in for a world of hurt. And I think that's what Joe Biden is, to some effect, what he's trying to say. That, yeah, we're going to be close to Armageddon. I don't know if it'll be full on Armageddon. I think that they know that there is a real possibility of Russia using some sort of nuclear weapon on Ukrainian soil. I think these are all realities that they're setting up, because they know that if they get through this midterm, things are going to get worse. And even, hey, I think there's still a good chance that the Republicans are going to take the House. Even with that switch, we all know that kind of change is going to take some time, and it doesn't go into place until January. So we still have and Joe Biden is still there as president, running these policies and heading us in a direction for another 2 years. So no one has said this, right? But everybody seems to be kind of like saying, oh, the worst is yet to come. And there is no signal from the Biden administration that they have a handle on things any better than they did 6 months ago, a year ago, or whatever all of this trouble started. So how do we not assume that it's headed to get worse than to get better before we can see any kind of real change?
Talking about the Ukraine war, Trish, this isn't playing out like we were told it was going to play out. If you remember back in, when was it? End of February? When did the invasion occur? End of February, whenever it was.
Yeah, March.
We were told 2 or 3 days Ukraine would fall, Kiev would fall, all of that. And here we are 8 months later, whatever it is. And it appears that actually Ukraine has the upper hand here. How does this affect any of this? Do you think this is a win for Biden?
No, no matter how Ukraine pans out, it's not a win across the board. The damage that has been done with this conflict, and the damage that has been done to morale in America. I mean, we've spent how many trillions of dollars on this war at this point? I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, I saw the list the other day, and it was like 60 billion here, 120 billion here, another. It's like, seriously, we have no money. Like, we have no money to give. But, Joe Biden has to keep giving, because where else is he going to launder all of his money? Where are all the other global elites going to launder all their money if the Ukraine falls? If Ukraine falls, then the globalists are kind of SOL. So they're not going to have any place to launder their money, because we know that that's why Zelensky was installed in the first place. Like, this is all part of the big scheme. And listen, let's face it, if Russia really did, if Putin really did want to take Ukraine, he could have done it in 3 days. He didn't want to destroy the country. I keep trying to tell people, I don't think Putin is the bad guy you think he is in this situation. The eastern part of Ukraine was all very Russian sympathizing. They voted to go back and be part of Russia. And Ukraine said, no, you can't. You have to stay here. So this is a whole thing. If these leftists with all their Ukrainian flags in their bios on Twitter actually believed in the democratic process, they would have allowed the eastern part of Ukraine to go back to Russia, because that's what they voted for. But they don't. No, see, they don't believe in democracy. They only believe in democracy when you vote in what they believe in. If you don't vote that way, then they don't believe in democracy. But I'm very concerned about the amount of money that we're spending that we don't have. That, again, what else is that going to affect inflation? Yeah. And Joe Biden could talk about how much he reduced the deficit all he wants, but the fact of the matter is the deficit was still over $1 trillion. So it's like, great, honey, instead of being $100,000 in debt, we're only $50,000 in debt. Look at how great I am. Like, what? No, honey, no, we're still $50,000 in debt. Like, stop. It's very frustrating from a taxpayer perspective.
Yeah, he talks about lowering the deficit, but he doesn't explain the fact that the deficit was was swollen because of all the COVID spending, the irregular COVID spending. And that was going to go away regardless. So we all hoped it would go away regardless, and it did. So he claims that as a deficit victory. But JR, I want to go back to Ukraine and Russia. One of the things I find very, very bizarre is that Ukraine is actually getting technology help from Iran with these drones. Doesn't that seem very strange to you that Iran is technologically superior in this particular segment to Russia? That seems really odd to me.
Yeah, I saw that as well, and it just was bizarre that they were getting themselves involved in this at all anyway. But they certainly haven't showed any sophistication that I remember when the war was going on, a decade ago or whenever it was. So the fact that they have this, the question I have is what countries stamped on the stuff that they acquired from who knows where? China? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. That's just speculation. But for them to be doing this and being involved to that degree and with this kind of technology, to me, it gives a little more credence to the fact that they could be further along on their nuclear capabilities than we even speculate they are as well. If they have technology in one facet, they probably have it in another. And, this whole nuclear Armageddon comment that Biden made, that's completely reckless to even articulate that in public. The fact that they're planning, for contingencies and stuff behind closed doors. Again, he doesn't remember what he said to who and when and why, So, but I'm sure we have intel on that. That isn't for public consumption, but it does seemingly make a strange bedfellow in this conflict. That's for sure.
Vince, I'm going to give you 3 points on this, comment on all or none or whatever. One is Trish brought up the fact that we're spending a lot of money supporting this Ukraine war, whether you believe it's justified or not. The other part of that is not just the money, it's the arsenal that we're depleting. Our arsenal is being depleted by sending all that weaponry and stuff that'll take years to replace over to Ukraine. That's the first thing. The second thing is when we talk about this technology, if Iran is sending high-tech drones to Russia, technology they don't have, do we have to worry about Russia sending nuclear technology back to Iran as a payment for that or a thank you for that? I mean, that's got to be a real possibility. And the third thing I'll say here is you as our crack political analyst, I'm starting to sense that there's going to be some major peace settlement announcement next week, maybe just before the midterms. That's going to be this major win for Joe Biden. And the reason I say that is there's a lot of talk now between the Ukrainian foreign minister, the Russian foreign minister, and the U.S. State Department. Could that be brewing in a political sense?
All right.
Was that crack? Crack political or
he is
crap? Crap or
no,
crap?
he is definitely our crack.
Crap political. On crack. He said I was a crappy political an analyst.
That's what I
was
got.
on crack. Yep. All of it. All true, by the way. No, it's not true. It's not all true. I'm not a crappy analyst. I might be on crack, but I'm not a crappy analyst. So let me start from the top. I think all of the money in the arsenal we're sending over there, and that's just what we know about. I think we're in a situation very similar to when the Russians invaded Afghanistan during the Cold War, near the end of the Cold War. I think that's the surface is what we know about the money and the weaponry. I'm sure there's a lot more underneath that. Listen, I think, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if we should be concerned because Iran is sharing technology with Russia. I think we should be concerned that we confirmed that Iran and Russia share technology back and forth constantly. I mean, I don't think this is a first time partnership, right? I think they've been together doing these types of things for a while. They just, again, this is the one we know about. I would think long term on this. I think we also need to be careful of, a la Afghanistan, where all this arsenal and partnerships, where they all end up in the end of this when it is over. We know how that played out, with a you could say, and many would say, that it resulted in a terrorist attack on American soil after it was all said and done, because that's, we had the weaponry and the technology that was used there all ended up in the wrong hands. And lastly, listen, everybody tries to look for the October, now November surprise sometimes, right? And I just don't. There must be a major deal in. If Biden thinks that this would be good, that is one major deal that's in place that's got to be good for Russia, because I don't think Russia is going to come up with a deal in that situation that is just for the benefit of Joe Biden. It's going to be entirely for their own benefit, and just Joe Biden may be able to sweep in. I think it's very possible, because you're right. All of a sudden, there's talks that have started to sprout up, and yes, does he come in and be the hero and save his numbers just before the election? If that's the case, I will say it's going to have to happen pretty soon, because you're in that window. You're in the window of when something has to happen to affect that election. So,
all right, I want to move on, Trish. I want to talk about the midterms. We've touched on bits and pieces of it already, but Newt Gingrich said this morning on Fox, which I found to be exciting, I guess.
Well, look, I think a tsunami is coming. I think it's going to be huge, and when people learn that every single Democrat in the House voted for the Transgender Supremacy Act, and that all of the Democratic senators who were up for re-election, every one of them co-sponsored the Transgender Supremacy Act in the Senate, and they look at the details of that bill, and they realize that, it would guarantee any boy who decided to declare he was a girl could go into the girls' locker room. It would guarantee that students could be tutored by their school without telling their parents. It would place transgender rights above religious liberty. The Catholic bishops had a devastating critique of the bill. These are the kind of radical things. If you look, say, at the Latino community, it's the combination of the economy. You can't afford the gas, you can't afford the food, you can't afford the rent, you can't afford the electricity, and radical values. And the two together are repelling people from the Democratic Party on a scale. This may be the biggest Republican election since 1920.
Trish, is that Newt Gingrich just being a cheerleader, or do you think he's got actual insight? I mean, I always respect what Newt says, but a lot of times when you get close, Vince will tell you, you talk like it's going to be the best election since 1920, regardless of what you really know is going to happen.
No, I think he's on the right track. And I can tell you the climate down here in Florida, there's a big to-do right now because a lot of people are claiming that the Hispanic and Latino population, or Latinx population, if you're a Democrat, is going to be voting Democrat. And I can tell you right now, that's not happening. Like, the swing of Democrat voters, Latino voters who have been voting Democrat has been going the opposite direction. Like, Miami-Dade in the last election, 250,000 vote swing from the Democrats to the Republicans. 250,000. And that's only getting worse, because now, we have, and especially amongst the independents, and I think that's what really matters, because I think your hardcore Republicans and your hardcore Democrats are there set in stone, and anything you say to them, nothing's going to change their mind. It's those independents. And we have a huge population of independents in Florida, and a lot of those independents are voting for Republicans because the Republicans are delivering on the economy. They're delivering on protecting parents' rights with their children. They are delivering. This is a big issue. We down here in Florida, we have passed, laws that prohibit, men from being in women's sports. We've done everything we can. We've tried to keep pornography out of elementary schools. And I can't believe we actually have to pass a law that says you shouldn't have pornographic material in an elementary school. I cannot believe this is something we actually have to say, but this is what the left wants. And so, you shouldn't have a drag queen gyrating his crotch in front of your child. This isn't appropriate entertainment for children. I can't believe we actually have to say this as adults. And I'm sorry, it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on.
Let me interrupt. Not just say it, but we actually have to get in arguments about it.
Right. Thank you. Like, what sane adult wants to have a man gyrate his crotch in front of their child, or have their child hand him a dollar bill after he's gyrated his crotch in front? I'm sorry. Like, what kind of insane lunatic are you that you expose your children to this? You are insane. So they're pushing more and more Democrats. And even here in Florida, the former Palm Beach County mayor, a Democrat, lifelong Democrat, actually put his weight behind Ron DeSantis. which was like a big deal. Everybody was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, this is blue Palm Beach County, suddenly going, hey. And that was one of the reasons was, the left has just gone so insane that a lot of people, even Democrats, moderate Democrats and independents, cannot vote that direction. And all the polling amongst independents is leaning hard right here in Florida. So I think that's just a general indication of what's happening all over the country. Parents are tired of their children being exposed to pornography. They're tired of their children being exposed to this. If you're 7, you can decide that you're going to be a girl when you're a boy. It's like, I'm sorry, when I was 7, like whatever. One day I was a mermaid. The next day I was an astronaut. The next day I was that's part of being an imaginative child. But to tell a child, and my thing is, it's again, they're the one who are stereotyping the genders. Just because you put on a dress and a pair of high heels and talk in a high squeaky voice so you can go talk to Joe Biden in the White House does not mean you're a woman. Like, I'm sorry, but you are appropriating my culture, and I'm tired of it. Bigots, stop it. That's my culture, and you can't have it.
JR.
Sorry, and rant.
Yeah, no, that was good. JR, one of the things we're seeing in this midterm season that I don't think we've ever seen before, whether it's been a midterm election, whether it's been even local elections or a presidential year, is this absolute denial of a robust debate schedule between candidates. The Democrats will not debate. I mean, they begrudgingly agreed to one Fetterman-Oz debate. Trish, you saw Chris DeSantis. Is that the only one? Just the one?
Well, for governor, yeah. And then we had our senatorial one last week.
And you had Rubio Deming.
Rubio Deming last week. Yeah.
But I know that Carrie Lake's opponent isn't going to debate her. This is happening all over the place. Democrats are just saying, nope, not going to debate. Talk about a threat to democracy.
Yeah, I mean, you can only say to yourself that they obviously don't have anything to advertise. So, and they other than what they want to control and the couple of narrow topics they have. So if they are debating, obviously they're debating very late in the game where, even early voting has already started so that they can bank a certain amount before they potentially say something they don't want to say during these debates. So you Fetterman, what's that, tomorrow, isn't it? Or it's this week?
Yeah, tomorrow night.
And then there's one in Ohio with
Vance and Ryan,
Senator there to Vance, and then our own governor was having a very narrowly. I mean, it was on New York One, or she was limiting even where it was going to be broadcast.
That's tomorrow night too, I think, isn't it, Vince? Is that tomorrow night?
I think that's tomorrow,
yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So I mean, You're right. I mean, on some are not debating whatsoever because, quite frankly, they don't have a good message to tell. And you know what? It's better to not say your bad points than to be out there and make sure that they're reinforced. So it's very telling that they've skated clear of debates, or to the degree that they can, they've limited to one and even tried to narrow the audience. And you know what? I think the point Trish was making about those independents, I don't think those independents are voting. I think they are early voting. I think they're voting later because, if anybody's undecided, that means they don't like the situation the way it is, and they're going to wait for the debate and then either vote in person or vote very late in the game after these debates. So if you can believe the polls where they are, if you believe Newt, who's basically seeing the red wave, and he was talking about this transgender thing. Well, it immediately made me think of Youngkin and the Virginia race and how that really swung with the wives and the moms and the education. And I just saw a poll too that said the third most important issue at this election is education again. And I hadn't heard a lot about education being a front level issue lately, but all of a sudden it seems to be in the last week again. So I think these debates, I'm very interested to see some of these debates. And I think that the needle will move more red after these debates than it even has. And if you believe the polls at all, which seemingly are always, I think they understate the Republican position. The last several elections have proven that, or they've been completely wrong. I would tend to side with Newt. I'm cautiously optimistic though, because we got to get to the finish line here, because we have to have change. The level of deterioration in our society on so many levels is got to be more evident to everyone, and they certainly got to get out and vote and try to fix this thing.
Yeah, Vince, that's part of my problem here. We know the polls are flawed. They've been very flawed the last few elections, but still, given, as JR just put it, the level of decay in our society and the state of our nation, how can these things even be close? Comment on that quickly, but then I want you to talk about the New York governor's race, Hochul-Zeldin, because those numbers are all over the place, but they have been trending in favor of Zeldin. What are your thoughts on the race?
Sure. What was the first thing you wanted me to comment on?
The fact that I don't remember now.
Crap.
What was it?
Maybe I was right about that crap politician.
Yeah,
Trish,
right?
You must remember what I asked. I don't.
I have no idea.
I never argued. I never argued the fact that I wasn't easily distracted. I never argued that. He asked the
about
second
the
question. I'm
independent.
lost.
No, I don't think I did. I don't think I did. Trish, nice try though. Thanks for trying to save me. That wasn't it though.
Whatever.
Then answer the second question, right? Vince, and I'll see if I can
roll the tape back. Yeah, see if you come up with it. I do want to start with this though. I do want to start with this because we kicked off with the Newt clip. I had the pleasure of working for Newt, and actually in 2012 spent almost 3 weeks on the road with him in Iowa.
Oh wow,
which was absolutely fascinating. Wow. Yeah, when he was running for president, he is one of the best guys ever. He actually looks better now than he did on the road in 2012. But that's then. And I always think of that election, like he was the front runner in Iowa, and he basically got tripped up a little bit on his immigration stance. But I always like to think about the fact that if he won Iowa, he would have gone on.
Didn't he win South Carolina? Didn't he win South Carolina that year?
He did.
And he came out strong out of South Carolina. And then it just fizzled out.
And then the problem was he actually had a very solid position on immigration, but to the very hardcore, it sounded too much like amnesty, and it just screwed him the rest of the way. So, and that was the big issue then. So long story short, if he were the nominee, I've always been convinced that he would have beaten Barack Obama. And just imagine like the change in history from there on forward would have been pretty amazing to think of. But anyway, I just remember him being a great guy. And I love it. I think he's one of the best cheerleaders for our party when he gets out there and does this thing. So I think he is doing that thing. But I do also think he believes it. He's also one of the most intelligent guys I've ever worked with.
Sure.
And honestly, I just find it interesting that he alluded back to the 1920 election, and he didn't mention the 1994 election, which is usually the standard bearer for Republican red waves that he led, and he didn't use that as his litmus test for this year. But I thought that was interesting and maybe a little telling. But yeah, I think what we're seeing here, I'm going to lead into your question, but I want to look at the macro in terms of how these midterms are shaping up, and everybody just kind of showed us a piece of that as we went around. And depending on where you live in this country, you are seeing this election through a totally different lens. As far as the congressional midterms are concerned, I think it's in the hands of maybe 50 to 55, 60 seats in the entire country that are going to decide the final makeup of Congress. And if you look at where those places are, you've got like a couple seats in California that are actually in play. You've got seats so it's these bluer purplish type states. If you're in a red district, if you're in a blue district, they are almost pretty much baked right now. But if you're in a place where things are starting to swing or there's a different issue. So yeah. And while education is nationally, people are talking about education. I can tell you right now in New York, education is not even on the radar for voters. They are worried if you're a Republican, your top issues are the economy and then it's crime. If you're a Democratic voter in New York, the issues are the economy and then abortion in that order. And there's this other thing that's been polled in New York, and I don't know if it's been done in other parts of the country, but there is something that has popped as a top issue, and it's threats to democracy that both sides are responding to with their own view of what a threat to democracy has been. and I don't have to tell you where. So what, and kind of what we're seeing so what's happening in New York, now to get to your question, what's happening in New York is, and this is what I believe is happening around the country, is the Democrats are trying to turn this into a base election where they find core issues that people come out and vote for every 2 years, 4 years, wherever the big election is, and they are trying to push everybody to the two sides. Now, in New York particularly, and this is also, there's other places around the country where this is happening, and this is why I think we're seeing possible swing seats in places like that are in play in places like California. Pennsylvania is a little iffy this year, but places like that, things are looking a little purple, which means that's where the balance is going to swing. But in New York, you have major crime problems in New York City. And when there's crime in New York City, it's not so much New York City people that get concerned, it's the suburbs that get concerned. So we're seeing our Republican candidate do really well in places like Long Island and the Hudson Valley suburbs of New York City. Long Island is known to have a lot of retired police and firemen, but they're also very union type communities as well. Police unions, fire unions, contractors, a lot of folks like that on the island. And you would think of them as traditionally Democratic voters when they vote union issues. But because you've got an issue like crime that has snuck in, now all of those folks on Long Island, they start to swing a little more to the right. And that's what's starting to swing our election. That's what's tightened our election down here in New York. And the interesting thing, though, is New York City is going to be blue. But the suburbs, like I said, are certainly leaning a little more red, and it's very tight. But then as you move upstate, and everybody thinks of rural upstate New York as very Republican country, which technically it is, but you're seeing the race in New York not be as wide a margin for the Republican candidate as it normally should be, which is a bit of in upstate New York, right? Rural upstate, that it's tighter than it normally should be. That should be a much wider margin where the Republican is beating the Democrat. I think if we really looked into that, I think the reason is that because so many people have fled New York State, that it's a lot of Republican voters who have fled New York State over the last 4 years.
Yep.
The other thing that is making our race tight is the sitting governor of New York is not elected. She took over. She was the lieutenant governor when the governor Andrew Cuomo was forced out of office and he was forced to resign. So this is her first statewide election, and quite frankly, from Democratic elections that I've seen run, and I had the pleasure of having candidates 3 times running against Andrew Cuomo, who was a political, like him or not, and it doesn't matter if you like him or not, the guy was a political animal, and he had 30, 40, 50, $60 million on hand. It's almost impossible to beat someone like that, which it was. And now we're seeing somebody who's still well funded as the Democratic governor of New York, but doesn't have anywhere near the machine or the political prowess of an Andrew Cuomo. In fact, you could almost call Kathy Hochul an unknown in terms of the big scheme of things. So it has certainly leveled the playing field and turned New York into a crazy dynamic. And I will say more to where that's going to spill over. And I said this beforehand, I'll say it again. If I wake up the day after the election day and you tell me the Republican won by 3 points, I wouldn't be surprised. If I woke up the day after election day and we find out that the Republican lost by 20 points, I wouldn't be surprised. It is that crazy. And every day a different poll comes out that says the Republicans up by 1, the Republicans down by 3, the Republicans down by 20. The Democrats are sliding, and it's been all over the map, and it's all based on turnout and who's coming out. And I think JR, you kind of said this, is what are those independents and those undecideds in the middle? What are they going to do? And sure, the best case scenario is, and I think this is why, again, the Democrats could go back to that. The Democrats are looking to have that base election, get all our people out to vote on our issue. And in New York, guess what the issue they're screaming about the most? Abortion, abortion, abortion. They want to talk about Roe v. Wade, and the Republicans are coming to steal your health care for women. And they're honestly, it's working for them. but it's only going to go so far. And the same thing with crime. You know, the Republicans are beating the heck out of all the Democrats on things like, you know, our dangerous bail reform laws that they passed that put criminals back on the streets. And you know, the entire defund the police movement finally has blown up in the Democrats' face, and that's coming. How far does that bleed into the independents, where they believe that that's a strong enough issue that they will then lean right and go and vote to the right this year? And the scariest thing that happens in those situations, and you said this, if they're not, is we need to get them to the polls. And you're going to have this piece in the middle that are going to get so fed up and so bothered, they're not going to vote. And that's why these polls have been all over the place. And I think we're seeing this in other places in the country, is nobody can agree on the percentage of Democrats to Republicans, upstate to downstate, the suburbs here in New York. Nobody can agree on who's actually coming out to vote. And each poll is coming with a different model, and that's coming up with different results. So to say that a pollster is right or wrong is less accurate than saying everybody has a different view of what this election is going to look like. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing nationally. So I think we're in a situation where when it comes down to the midterms for Congress, we could see the Republicans with a narrow to somewhat larger victory in Congress, and we could also see them where I don't think the Republicans are going to lose seats in Congress, but they could get right up to where they've got 218, 215, 218 seats, and just not enough to take over, but enough to narrow it right to the edge, which would be terrible for us to be that close and not be able to get over the hump. So, but even the race to watch.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Good. No, I was just going to say the race to watch in New York now, as far as the congressional races, the race to watch is the 17th district, which is primarily it's Lower Hudson Valley, Rockland County. Sitting Republican assembly member from our legislature is going up against Sean Patrick Maloney, who you'll know the name as the chairman of the Democratic Congressional Committee. He's the guy that basically runs the show for the Democrats campaign arm. He is in a fight for his life.
He's down like 11,
and it says
isn't he?
a lot. That's another one that I've seen it. I've seen it all over the place, but it's tight, and he's worried to the point where the DCCC that he oversees just redirected $600,000 to be spent in that race for the next 2 weeks leading it now, which has significance all over the country, because the question is, what other races in the country did they take that $600,000 from to go spend it on their leader's race? So again, that's the race to watch, because anytime you knock out the leader, you've got something going. You've got some sort of trend happening nationally, most likely.
Well, here's my problem, and I don't disagree with anything Vince said, Trish, but the idea that the Republicans, I say we, but the Republicans aren't basically assured a majority after election night, to the point where we actually have 20, 30 seats beyond a majority, to me is a bit of a disappointment, given the state of this nation and the state of the Biden agenda. And that was my question A to Vince, and I'll give it to you, Trish. How is it possible that, given the state of our country right now and the things we are seeing in everything the Democrats have touched in the last 2 years has fallen to shit, how are we close in any of these races?
Yeah, I would agree, because I think if you can't look from a completely unbiased viewpoint, and if you can say right now that the economy is great and that we're doing so much better than we were 2 years ago under Trump, I would tell you need some mental health help, because anybody who can say that with a straight face and believe it is in such deep denial of reality that you can't fix them. And unfortunately, I mean, being in Palm Beach County, we have a lot of those people here that are very blue and very set, and it doesn't matter what. Trump is horrible. Everything that's wrong now is all Trump's fault. Inflation is going up because of Trump stuff. It was Trump did this, Trump did that. And I'm like, wait, Trump's been out of office for 2 years. How long? You're going to really spend the whole Biden presidency trying Trump for everything and just completely ignore the fact that every single policy that Biden has put into effect has been garbage, that it has, they are trying to destroy the petroleum industry, which if they do would be catastrophic, not just for this country, but for the entire world. Like if we the fact that our own president is begging the Saudis for oil and the Saudis are like, yeah, screw you, fuck off. Like, no, can you wait till after the midterm before you do the slowdown? Because the Saudis like, yeah, fuck off, whatever, we're going to do what we want. The leader of the free world is begging for oil when we have people here going, we want to produce oil and you won't let us. Like, if you can't see that from a completely unbiased perspective, I can't help you. Like, you're just lost. But we have a growing and growing population that are just in complete denial about reality. And how do you fix that? How do you fix mental health issues? Like, I think, I don't know if any of you guys watch the show The Boys on Amazon. Do you guys, any of you? It's kind of a spoof of all the superhero Marvel, DC stuff that's coming out. Anyway, the character who plays the spoof on Superman in this has severe mental illness, and so now in the new season they're going to make him an LGBTQ member. They're going to, and the actor who played it, kid you not, literally said, well, he was already mental ill, so I can see why that would be the natural progression. So I was like, oh, snap. So I mean, I think even Hollywood is starting to recognize that this has just become, like, if you literally are, these people aren't drinking the Kool-Aid, they are freebasing it. They're like, they've just gone, they're in deep, and you can't get them out. So I'm praying, please, independent voters.
Yeah.
Please do us a favor and get out there and vote.
By the way, Vince, we have a fellow Elise Stefanik district voter in our Foxhole chat. Michelle Ann is in the same district we're in. I mean, Elise Stefanik doesn't have anything to worry about, right?
No. But of course but go out and vote for her if you're in the district.
Yeah, right.
That's where somebody like her runs into trouble.
Right.
But no, she doesn't. They actually tried to put a decent candidate up against her, but it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
She's going to be just fine.
So, JR, I want to one more question on this whole midterm idea here, and I want you to comment on any of this. I mean, some of the things we've seen the last couple of weeks, we've seen AOC being heckled at a couple of town hall meetings that she's held, one of which she's sitting on the stage and they're chanting AOC's got to go, however the rhyme is, and she's dancing to it. She's like, fuck you in your face to the people in her district that are protesting her. She's dancing to it, mocking them, basically, which is disgusting from my perspective. I can't believe that she can get away with that without any major media criticism. The other thing is that races like Kari Lake in Arizona is looking good for Kari Lake. Tudor Dixon against Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, that's looking better than anybody thought it would. And then one of the dark clouds in all of this is you've got Lisa Murkowski in Alaska being funded and supported by Mitch McConnell. Lisa Murkowski just endorsed Sarah Palin's a Democrat opponent in that race, in the congressional race there. Yet she's still getting support from Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republican Senatorial Committee, whatever that is, that funds those races. That I'd say is a major dark cloud in all of this.
Yeah, again, Vince talked about the national macro view and how, certainly at the border, that's going to be regionally, pro-Republican based on the dire consequences of things that are it's just a travesty what's going on down there. And you look at all these other places in different parts of the country, and, certainly Michigan, that's just encouraging. I mean, she was, if you remember, Michigan was locked down, in tune with like California. And she is not liked, and again, there's a lot of fair-minded people in Michigan that I think is putting that in play. AOC, though, it wasn't that long ago she was the darling of the Democratic Party, wishing she was a little bit older, she could run for president, and now she's mocking her constituents that are booing her. I mean, if role reverse that a little bit. Say that was a Republican. We saw it a little bit with some of the younger Republicans that had stubbed their toe a little bit, and they were excoriated in the liberal press. So the fact, I think at a minimum, this knocks her down a peg on the national stage, certainly. But we'll see what happens. With her own candidacy, if it takes kind of a hit on this. But Murkowski, I mean, we've tolerated some of these Republicans because we've had to. And, with Murkowski and with our own leadership endorsing her and throwing money at her when she doesn't even endorse her own, peer Republican, is just, it tells us and reinforces what some of the problems are within the Republican Party still. But going back to your initial comment to Chris and your topic there, if we can't win this year, when are we going to win, right? I mean, you look at almost every issue, and it's going the wrong way under the Democratic leadership. How bad really does it have to get? I mean, you look at the issues that this transgender bill you're talking about a very fringe issue. That's if are you better off today than you were 2 years ago? You got to be on the extreme far left of the equation to think that that's such an important issue that, yes, we are doing better, right? I mean, that's such a minority position. And that's what they're running with 2 weeks, prior to the election. I mean, we better, or Newt better be right, because it's concerning what Vince says. I mean, even Zeldin. I mean, the fact that it could be a 25-point swing and you wouldn't be surprised either way. I like to think that the trend is going his direction, certainly, and I can't believe he'll lose by 20, especially with all the issues we have. And the other quick thing I'll just say, It wasn't that long ago in the spring when we were talking about everything was abortion, right? And we all said, I believe we were all in agreement that, well, that's going to play its course, but come October, that can't be really an in-play issue. And they've lacked so many other issues that it became in play again. So again, the fact that that's in play again, seemingly in the Democrats' talking points, tells us that they really don't have anything else. So, I look at it. My feel is it's going to be a pretty solid Republican victory, but that's just my take at the moment.
And I just want to point out something else. We talk about the Republican leadership, the problems there when you've got Mitch McConnell supporting the likes of Lisa Murkowski. You also have Mitt Romney not endorsing the challenger or the Republican in Utah who's running against an independent who is actually going to caucus with the Democrats. Romney doesn't endorse him. And then you've got the likes of Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. This is a major problem within the Republican Party. There is a lot of this, and it has to be rooted out. Vince, I want to change the topic here because we're getting pretty late here. But I want to talk a little about inflation. As an issue, obviously, it's at the top of the list with the economy. Even you must be experiencing price increases when you go out shopping for your Air Supply and your Barry Manilow T-shirts. I mean, it's got to be affected there. But how do you think inflation is going to play out in this election? And does it carry over to 2024, do you think?
Listen, like I said, everything we've seen. First of all, that was a Peter Frampton T-shirt. I gotta clarify this first. It was a Peter Frampton T-shirt. So it's not even close to Barry Manilow or
Air Supply.
Air Supply.
REO Speedwagon.
And for what it's worth, that's probably the only item that I buy that I haven't seen a price increase on. Have been old 70s and 80s band T-shirts. That's probably the only thing that I haven't seen a price increase on.
He already has those.
Still get those.
That's why.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right, those are holdovers. What was the question again? No, I'm sorry. Wait, no. Wait, I got it. What was I going to say? Yeah. So
okay. Let me ask the question differently though. Biden is already saying that the Republicans are going to bring a recession if they win. We already know there's going to be a recession next year. We know that's coming. Yeah. Business leaders throughout the country are saying it's basically 100%. So he's setting up the Republicans to take the blame. Does this ultimately hurt us in 2024?
I think they're trying to set it up to try to hurt us. Sure. But again, I mean, they are not going to be able to shed the blame for this issue just because the Republicans win Congress. I really don't. They still are going to have, I'm assuming they're still going to hold the Senate, right? And they're certainly going to have the White House. And if that's the case, if as long as Joe Biden is the face out there, and especially if Joe Biden's the one trying to explain it for his party, I don't think he gets away with that too well. I really don't. So does it hurt us? They're definitely going to put some blame on us. I don't think it sticks. I think it sticks. I think it takes us back to where we are today. We're in this very base election, right? Where both sides are going to take their sides up and believe the talking points coming from their side. And I just think that's the reality of it. And we know things are going to get worse before they get better. We know that. And I think, again, I don't think the people are going to be foolish enough to fall for that. And here's the other point to remember. It's because and it kind of goes even to the previous conversation a little bit. It's while and it is kind of mind-boggling. While inflation in the economy it's the top issue that everyone is identifying as their number one issue of concern right now, it's not everybody's number one issue. It's a number one issue to 30% in a good number, right? That I've seen. I've seen it bottom out at the high 20s. I've seen it top out at like 35. There's still 2/3 of the likely voter population who think that it's another issue that's most important to them. And that's where people who they're falling for, or I shouldn't say they're falling for, but I think they're falling for it. But that's why they're led to go out and vote, though, because of abortion, or, like I said, threats to democracy, which is a clear signal of talking about January 6th, or all these things that just shouldn't matter anymore. And like, it come back to the New York example. For the next 2 weeks, if the Democrats know what they're doing, they are going to go into New York City, and they are going to show pictures of the Republican gubernatorial candidate in New York and Donald Trump. And yes, Trish, yeah, they still use Donald Trump as the foil against the Republican candidates. And it's nuts. But you know why why it's being used? Because it works with their people, because they are so simplistic when it comes to what you can turn them to vote. And to your point, JR, where do I think that, it could be a 20-point swing is when they're able to get an extra million votes out of New York City. And those aren't votes for the Republican candidate ever. That's the kind of stuff that gives us that crazy wide swing. And I think that's what this election, the entire election nationwide, that, to make the micro example, the macro, right? That's what's going on across this country. They're finding those pockets, and they're going to the least common denominator of issue, whatever gets that person excited, and they're driving them out with that issue. And yeah, for me, I would say 9 out of the 10 issues I hear are something that wouldn't even get me excited to go vote for somebody. But there they are, using all these issues to go get people out to vote.
Trish, I want to bring up something the Democrats, particularly Nancy Pelosi over the weekend, but all the Democrats are using this same talking point out about inflation. They're saying inflation's a global problem. It's worse in other countries than it is here. We're doing better than anybody else. And I want to give them that point for just a second. I don't think it's true, but just for sake of discussion, I want to cede that point to them. And then I would respond to them by saying, yes, and we caused it by doing but the Biden administration caused it by their war on fossil fuels. So they not only screwed the US, but they screwed the rest of the global economy because of this war on fossil fuels. So they take the blame either way.
Because they bought into the whole Green New Deal bullshit. That's the whole reason Sri Lanka blew up. I mean, let's face it, their green ideas in Sri Lanka brought into them hook, line, and sinker, and their country imploded. The president took off because they were having starvation. I mean, they literally had no food. And they're the same thing. And like, you never hear about all of the protests that are happening in the Netherlands and France and Germany over the fact that they're limiting farming. I mean, I literally saw an interview, and I try not to judge young people. I really don't, but they're just so stupid. They interviewed this young college kid, and he literally said, we need to stop farming because that's the number one cause of, greenhouse gases. And I'm like, you dumbass, if you stop farming, you're going to starve to death. How out of touch with reality are you that you don't realize that the food that you eat comes from a farm? Like, I'm not quite sure how out of touch with reality you have to be. But these Green New and Trump was right. Like, remember when Germany laughed at Trump when he said, you're going to be completely reliant on Russia for fuel, and you're going to end up, oh, gee, look at what happened. Trump was right again. Are they laughing now? I have a friend, his energy bill in Germany has gone up 350% since last year. Could you imagine if your heating bills went up 350% every month? If you had a business, could you imagine if your business, That's why he said they're having a lot of problem with businesses staying open, that everybody's closing their businesses and moving into having home offices and running everything online because they can't afford to heat their building. Never mind run a business. They can't afford to heat it. So I'm very concerned, especially with the winter coming. I hope there's a big cold snap, like right before the election, because I think that'll really set it home. But it's going to be really tough this winter with heating bills being, and it's not just in the US, it's all over Europe. And Europe, the EU's average inflation rate is only 10.2%. Cause you're every woman in the world to me.
I can't get it in the right spot.
Okay.
You're too far down there. Sorry, Trish, to jump in on your.
That's okay. That's okay. No, that was beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, all right. So one final point here on this inflation discussion, JR, and you and I and Vince. I can't remember what you heat your home with. I use fuel oil. It's the only thing really available other than propane in the village of Cooperstown, where I am. JR, I don't know what you use, Vince, I don't know, but they're talking about fuel oil shortages, heating oil shortages. And we already know, I think we're looking at like $6 plus a gallon. 2 years ago, it was $1.89. When it comes to heating your home, I mean, you only have so many options. You can only lower the thermostat so far. You can only put so many sweaters on. You can only put so many air supply T-shirts over those sweaters. So, I mean, this is going to be real pain for a lot of people.
Yeah, I already told you about my backup energy source here, and the pain I'm experiencing here after trying to do that. And I'm going to cut as much wood as I can because I got this backup wood stove. But my heating source in my home it was something popular about 25 years ago when the house was built. It's a 800-gallon water storage tank that heats up at the electric rate at night. And when was a differential between the night rate and the day rate, when there's less demand at night, then that was an economical system, which I still have. But I immediately, when I bought this house here, 15 years ago, I said, I've got to have a backup plan, because if the power goes out here in January, it will be refreshing. I got to have something to counter that. So, but I think the point you said earlier about the business community all across the country, they're preparing for much worse at this point, because we haven't seen the bottom. The bottom is approaching, but I think you're also right. If we take even one chamber of Congress, we're going to have the Democratic Senate, going against us. And if we take both chambers, Biden said today he's going to have his veto pen out. So they're going to own any obstruction to their policies that they've had that have created this mess in the first place. And they're going to have to demonstrate cooperation if we want to try to fix them. So, we'll see what happens in a couple weeks. But I think one of those scenarios will play out. And to me, looking at it at this juncture, 2 years out, I think 24 still will and should be a mandate on, the Democratic policies that put us where we are over the last 2 years.
Rebel in our secret YouTube channel, by the way, chat is saying that NOAA, the National Oceanographic, I'm not saying it right, administration, whatever the hell it is, they predict the weather, is saying it's going to be a warmer and milder winter, but the Farmer's Almanac is saying it's going to be colder and snowier. So I don't know who to believe. What's your Bunyan saying, Vince? What's it going to be this winter?
Farmers.
I would believe the farmers before I'd believe the scientists.
National Oceanographic. What is it?
National Oceanographic and Aeronautic Administration.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. All right. There you go. Well, all right. So that's going to do it for now. I wanted to talk Hunter Biden. I wanted to talk about the climate protesters that are throwing things all over priceless works of art. I wanted to talk about all those things, but we're just out of time for tonight. So we've got other things to talk about next time we convene here. Thank you to everybody who's joined us. I will say this. We're going to try to get back on a regular schedule, but I'm not so certain it's going to be completely regular, given everybody's schedule and what's going on. I do need to ask this of this group here. Vince, you're probably occupied election night, right? You probably have stuff going on?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Probably.
All right. Well, either way, I want to try to make sure that we're on election night for anybody on our panel here that can do it and commit the time and kind of talk about results as they come in, and hopefully we have a lot of good things to talk about. Or it could be a depressing night, or it could be a jubilant night. I don't know which way it's going to go, but if we can, anybody keep that in mind to plan that if you can do it. I think that would be a lot of fun. What's our schedule? That's a great question, Michelle. We're at this point, I'm going to try to do Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. 9 p.m. is our new time. It seems to work for everybody, particularly Trish, who has to get up early. But like I said, we're going to try to be regular, but it won't be every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So just keep your notifications on and join us when you can. So anyway, thank you guys. Thanks for jumping in here. It was kind of short notice that we rev this engine back up, and I appreciate you all being here and offering your comments on all of this. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody next time. Again, we're shooting for Wednesday night. Cheers. Have a great night.